Owning forest land was a high priority for us when we were newly married, since Brian was a forester who always wanted to own forest land, and Donna was a forestry librarian who developed the same dream and goal. We purchased our first parcel in 1979, our second in 1981, and the third, largest, and favorite in 1987. None had merchantable timber on them, but that was okay, since they were intended for our retirement income. During the past 40 years, we have spent thousands of hours tending our tree farm, while also enjoying the wildlife and flowers and receiving the pleasure that comes from owning property like the B&D Tree Farm. Now we are in our retirement years and are reaping the rewards of our hard work by harvesting the timber. For the last 10 years, we have been harvesting a small unit every other year, and will continue for another 5 to 6 years. In the fall of 2020, 15 acres was shovel-logged by Tree Management Plus, owned by Tom Fox. The stand was 45 years old and was part of a 55-acre tract that had the same management regime. A pre-commercial thinning was done in 1991, taking the stocking from 600 trees per acre to 300 trees per acre. A commercial thinning was done in 2006, reducing the stocking to 180 trees per acre. In 2013, a second commercial thinning was done, lowering the stocking to 100 trees per acre. Both commercial thinnings were done with a cut-to-length processor and forwarder. We received a small profit from each thinning, despite the small diameters and short lengths that the processor must cut. Second commercial thinnings aren't done very often, but we chose to do it on 55 acres because we had 120 acres of the same aged timber and wanted to harvest it in small units over a number of years rather than all at once. We were not planning to log in 2020, but the market was very good, and we decided to log 15 acres that had an all-season rocked road for winter access. Logging in the Pacific Northwest has evolved to be mostly mechanical rather than by hand, and shovel logging is the most common method used. Our ground is fairly flat, so we do not have to consider other methods of logging that are used on steep ground. The remainder of this video shows the equipment and processes that were used by Tree Management Plus to harvest this unit for us. One operator in a feller buncher with a hot saw cut down the 1,500 trees in a little over 3 days. It would have taken a hand faller several weeks to cut the same amount. The hot saw blade is about 4 feet in diameter and has a solid 2-inch plate that slides under the tree as it is cut. On the outside of this circular plate is a 2-inch thick ring with special cutting teeth that are wider than the steel plate. The outer ring revolves about 1,500 revolutions per minute when it's fully revved up. It has a special clutch system that allows it to reach full revolutions, then be disengaged and pushed through the tree in a fraction of a second. It happens so fast that the plate is under the tree with 4 steel arms gripping it before the tree can move. The feller buncher then picks the tree up and moves it around to direct its fall. If the trees are small enough, the feller buncher can set them down in a controlled fall all the way to the ground. However, by the time the trees are 45 years old, they can only be controlled for about 1/2 of their fall. If trees are fallen across each other, there will be much more breakage, so the operator tries to lay them down parallel to each other as much as possible. Once the trees are on the ground, a shovel on tracks fitted with logging grapples begins moving the logs, which is called yarding, to a landing where they will be processed, piled, and loaded. The trees are grabbed one or two at a time and dragged into a pile. The shovel then moves 50 to 75 feet and yards the logs into a new pile, repeating the process until the logs are at the landing. Once the trees are on the landing, they are merchandised, which means removing any remaining branches, trimming the cut end, and cutting the logs into the desired lengths. In the process, the operator tries to cut out defect in the log, such as change of direction, rot, or high-angle branches, which will reduce the log value at the mill. Each mill has specifications for the size and length of logs that they want. A 40-foot log is usually preferred, but often they will accept a certain percentage of shorter logs. For this particular stand, we found that the log scale, and therefore our profit, could be increased by sending as many 32-foot long logs as possible. Fortunately, this was also a length that the mill wanted. On most of our past logging operations, we have had 4 to 6 log sorts, or destinations to different mills. On this one, we had only a domestic log sort and an export sort, with virtually no pulp. When a log truck arrives, the shovel takes the logs that have been merchandised and loads them onto the truck. On a larger unit, a second shovel might be used for merchandising and loading, leaving the first shovel to yard. However, on this small unit, just one shovel handled both jobs. A limited number of trucks were available, so the shovel operator had plenty of time to do both jobs. Many log trucks are independently owned, but often work for one logger the majority of the time. Because the market was strong, and therefore the demand for truckers high, we only had one truck working for us most of the time, with a second truck for 2 of the 5 weeks we hauled logs. Depending on how far the logs are yarded, how many trees per acre and their size, an average shovel side can send out 3 to 6 loads of logs a day. Because our logs were hauled either to Longview or Olympia, about an hour's drive each way, each truck could make just 3 trips a day. After the logging is finished, a decision must be made on the future of the land. The cycle of planting through harvesting takes 40 to 60 years. This land could easily be subdivided for residential development, as is happening right next to our property. But for us, it is an easy choice to continue the forest cycle. Although we won't be around to harvest the next crop, we will plant and tend the young seedlings on this unit like we are doing on our earlier harvest units. Brian will pile the limbs and debris with his dozer next summer. The piles will be burned next winter, and planting will be done the following spring. We will then have completed one cycle of seedling to mature forest and started another for future generations.